In this video, we're going to bring everything together, assemble the engine, and we put it to a vote with my patrons, and they said they'd like to see it assembled in Assembly4 and Assembly3. Well, today we're only going to be able to do Assembly4. It's going to take that long. I don't want to do both in one long video, it'd be way too long. So we're just going to do Assembly4 today. And we're going to start out by creating a new file and creating a new assembly, and then we're going to bring all the parts in. Along the way, I'm going to show you how I manage the parts, how I bring them together, how I make sure I can keep track of everything. And you'll see it gets quite complicated. Even though there's only a few parts, it gets quite complicated to make sure you have the right ends of each piece and how you have them all lined up. So without further ado, let's get on and have a look at that and see how we do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go into Assembly4. You'll see that. If you don't have Assembly4 listed here, what you may have to do is go to Tools and Add-on Manager. And then under Add-on Manager, you may have to find that workbench, and when you click on it, you can install it, and that will give you the Assembly4 add-on. And if you look in this whole list, you'll see all the other workbenches that you can add. Of course, there's many of them, but Assembly4 is the one we're working with today. So I'm going to close that, and we're going to go to Assembly4. Once you've added it, it'll appear in that list. And then in Assembly4, we're going to start a new file. And inside this file, we're going to create a new assembly. When you create an assembly, it has a list of, or a folder of parts, and then the model itself, which is the assembly model. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm going to say save as. And I already have a file. I already been playing around with it. So the engine Assembly4 is what I'm going to save it as. And I'm just going to go ahead and replace that one because it was just a blank file. And so I have my file empty. It has an LCS. And if you remember in the other video we did on Assembly4, you can create a master sketch and lay out your LCSs in that sketch if you want to. I'm not going to do that for this because I'm only going to put one piston into my cylinder head, and I'm going to align it all as we go. So let's take a look at. First, we're going to start out by opening our existing file. Remember from the previous video, we have the small engine file, and that small engine file has our piston, our conrod, and what I call the small end, brief explanation on that small end. So there is sometimes a small end bearing in there, but also sometimes it's just this wrist pin or gudgeon pin that holds that piston on. So technically that pin should really be called a wrist pin or a gudgeon pin, and then the bearing would be on that. Now I'm not going to mess around changing it. I'm just going to leave it as the small end bearing, but essentially I'm referring to that pin and the bearing itself. And then finally we have the crankshaft, which we modeled as well, all in this small engine file. So if you haven't seen where that small engine file came from, you need to go back 2 videos. So this is 17, that would be 15. If you go back to the beginner number 15, that's where we created all these parts, and you'll see how to do it. If you haven't seen that, you might get a little lost in this assembly. Okay, first things first, anytime you get this little check mark next to your part, it means it wants a refresh. So I'm just going to refresh it. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off everything but the piston. So here's the piston, and that's the piece that we want to be aligning. Remember to turn these parts off. I just select it and hit the space bar. That turns them on and off. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, small engine, I'm going to create a new part, and then I'm going to create a second new part and a third new part. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to separate these bodies out of this single part into their own parts ready for assembly. So I'm going to take this part and I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it part piston, and I'm going to leave the piston body in that part. I'm going to take this one, right click, rename, and I'm going to call it part conrod. And you guessed it, I'm going to take that conrod body and I'm going to drop it into that part conrod part. And then I'm going to rename this next one. I'm going to rename that to part small end bearing. I'm going to rename the last one to part crankshaft. So now I have all the parts. I'm going to take the small end bearing. Literally, I'm just clicking on it, hold down the left button, and drop it into my small end bearing part. And I'm going to click on that crankshaft, and I'm going to drop that in the crankshaft part. And if you wanted to see what happened, so inside the crankshaft now is the crankshaft body. Inside the small end is the small end body. Conrod is the conrod body. So now we have separate parts for each body. So somebody did ask the question, should I have created them in separate parts? You can create them in separate parts. You can create them all in one part because you can easily separate them and put them in the tree. But for assembly, we need them to be in their own parts. So we're going to assemble parts together. And so it's important that they're in their own parts. Now I'm going to go back to the piston. Going to make that the current part. So to do that, the active part, you just double click it and you see it highlights. Now what we need to do for assembly, we need to have in Assembly4, it should be clear that this is the Assembly4 way of doing things. So Assembly4 uses local coordinate systems to align everything. So you're just going to align the coordinate systems on top of each other. And so the way to do that with Assembly4 is you just create the local coordinate system where you naturally would assemble this part. Now, if we think about the piston is connected to the wrist pin or the small end bearing part across here, but it's also connected to the conrod. It's going to be connected to the conrod with that wrist pin. So we can either align it on the wrist pin or we can align it on the conrod. It doesn't matter, but we're probably going to want to align it in the center here, in the center of these holes. So I'm going to show you how to set up an LCS for that. So let's do that. And I can do it a number of ways, but I'm going to do it this way. So we select the piston, and in Assembly4, we select create a new coordinate system in a part. Click that, and I'm going to call this LCS is going to be called, I'm actually going to go all the way back here. I'm going to call it LCS piston and then bearing. Then I'm going to select this diameter. I'm going to flip this guy around and I'm going to select this diameter. Then I'm going to pick inertial CS and I'm going to quickly have a look and see that my LCS, you can see it there. If I zoom in, you can see the LCS is sitting there. This is the Z direction, and this is the X direction. This is the Y direction. So I want my Z direction pointing up, which it is, so that's all good. And I'm just going to apply that, say OK. And now I have an LCS that's piston bearing, so that I know where that one is. And so that's going to attach it to the conrod. Now the other thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to align this piston inside the bore. And to do that, we probably want an LCS on the top in the middle of this circle. So now what we're going to do is we'll select the piston again. I'm going to say add an LCS. And we're going to call this LCS piston and bore. And now I'm just going to select that circle, and I'm going to select concentric, and once more my Z is pointing up, so that's perfect. I'm going to say apply and say OK. And again, it wants a refresh, so I'm just going to refresh that. And now you can see if I am locating this piston, I can locate on this LCS, and I can locate on the LCS underneath, so I can locate on that LCS too. So from the point of view of assembly now, I can assemble it into the bore, and I can assemble it on the end of the conrod. So that's all I'm going to do with the piston. Take that out, close that. I'm going to go to the conrod now. So here's the conrod. I want to be able to assemble on this diameter and this diameter, so I need two LCSs. We're going to put an LCS in this small part, and so I'm going to select conrod, select the LCS. I'm going to call this conrod small. You can call it anything you like that you'll recognize, but you know, the more descriptive you are, the better it's going to be for you. I'm just going to select that circle, and I'm going to say inertial CS. I'm going to take a quick look inside, and you can see that my Z is pointing down and my X is pointing up. So I want to rotate on that Y. Let me hold on a sec. Let me zoom in there. Let's bring that over. If you see the green guy here, the one that I'm highlighting, that's the Y. So I want to rotate around that Y 90 degrees. So I'm going to do that right now. And now my X is pointing up. And so everything looks good. I'm going to say apply, say OK. Refresh. Now I'm just going to relocate this guy so I can do the same thing on this one, but I'm going to do big. I'm going to call this one big. So we're going to call it LCS conrod big. And that's the big end. So let's go there. We're going to go with this guy. I'm going to run that around once. Go with this guy. Inertial CS. I'm going to take a look inside. Once more, my Z is not pointing up, so I'm going to rotate that 90 around the Y again. That's much better. Say apply, say OK. So now we have the conrod and the piston, and they are both have two LCSs for us to locate things. Now I'm going to just carry on and do the same for each of these pieces. So let's go ahead and we'll do the next one. Just going to hit spacebar to get rid of that guy. Going to double click this, spacebar on the body. Let's just bring that into view. There it is up there. And I'm going to just do the same thing on this guy. I'm going to hit here and here and make sure my LCS is pointing up. So let's do that. I'm going to hit this. This is just small end bearing. And I'm just going to take the word part out. And the reason I'm doing that is it just makes the word longer, and I don't need to do that. So again, you can call it whatever you are comfortable with. So for this one, I'm going to hit this guy. I'm going to rotate this around. I'm going to hit this guy. And I'm going to say inertial CS. Take a quick look down the end there. This one doesn't really matter as long as the Z is pointing towards the edge, which it is. So I'm okay with that. We're going to say okay to that. And now that has an LCS. So that all looks good. And then for the crankshaft, Remember, we want to locate the big end on that, so I'm going to turn the small end off, and I'm going to turn the crankshaft on. Let's bring it to the middle. Oh, pressed the wrong button there. Let's bring it to the middle, zoom in. And I'm just going to do the center of this guy here. So if you watch, I will show you what I'm doing. So we're going to select crankshaft. We're going to add an LCS. We're going to call this one crankshaft right. And again, it doesn't really matter what you call it as long as you can remember what it is. That guy. And then the next edge is going to be that guy, inertial CS. Now I can see my Z is pointing out sideways. So again, I want to rotate it 90 degrees in the X, in the Y axis. And now it's pointing downwards, so I actually want it to be minus 90. That's better, so you can see it right there. If I zoom in, you can't see it until I zoom out actually. So there, I want it to be in line with this guy, so that's basically the right answer right there. Say apply, say okay. Now remember the way this thing is all going to line up is through those LCSs, so if you don't have them pointing in the right direction the way that you want, you're going to have difficulty doing the lineups. All right, so now we can, it doesn't really matter what they all look like. We have a way of lining them up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our engine assembly and we're going to start to assemble some parts. So I select on the model and I say insert, and you can see right away I have small engine part piston, small engine part conrod, small engine part small end bearing, small engine part crankshaft. So the first one I want to put in is the piston. So I'm going to insert that. When I do that, I have two LCSs to choose from. Remember, my bearing one is the piece that goes around this part, so it's this guy down here. So I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to put this in on the parent assembly and just put it in on the LCS origin and say OK. And now our model has just a piston in it. The next thing I'm going to do is add the wrist pin or the gudgeon or the small end bearing, whatever you want to call it. I've been calling it small end bearing, so I'm going to continue to do that. So I'm going to go small end bearing, insert, small end bearing, LCS. I want it to be attached to the piston, and I want it to be attached to the piston bearing. And now it looks like I have an issue there because well, looks like I'm going to have to rotate it 90 in the Y and 90 in the Z. No, 90 in the X, 90 in the Y. There you go, twice 90 in the Y. So not a big deal, but it would have come in straight if I had put the LCS in the right place. But that puts it where we want it to be. So you can see it's now located right through the piston. So if I say OK to that, now I have two pieces assembled. That's nicely sitting in the middle. Now we want to put our conrod around there. So we'll select that model and we'll say link part. It's going to be the conrod. We're going to insert that. We're going to go conrod small. So remember, that's the small end of it. And we're going to connect that to, we can actually connect it to the small end bearing, or we can connect it to the piston. I'm going to put it in the piston, and piston bearing is where I want that to be. So my conrod is in there. I somehow managed to switch off the pocket. That's actually the conrod. So we'll just turn that guy back on. There's my conrod sitting in exactly the right place we want it. That all looks good. And then the final thing we need to add is our crankshaft, and we will do that now. We'll go model, we'll go insert part, crankshaft, insert, conrod, big, there it is sitting there. Oh, that's very good. Say okay. And there we have our crankshaft, we have our conrod, our piston, and our small end bearing, all in this assembled model. So the next parts are our cylinder head, our cylinder, and our spark plug. And if you check out beginner number 16, you will find that. Beginner number 16 has those parts in it. So I'm just going to open up that file. And that is called cylinder block. And in opening that file, we can switch on our cylinder block, switch on our cylinder head, switch on our spark plug, and we can see all our parts together. One thing I did think about is in our cylinder head, before I go any further, let me turn off my cylinder block. Let me turn off my spark plug. We go into this sketch, and I just want to make this 35 instead of 25. Otherwise it won't clear the spark plugs. So I'm just going to do that before I do anything else. There we go. All right, I did notice that when I was looking at the assembly. Okay, so what we got to do for this is we got to do the same process that we just did. So I'm going to go in my cylinder block, and I'm going to create a part for the cylinder head and a part for the spark plug. So we are going to do that. We can do that from here. It's okay. And we're going to change this one to be part cylinder block. Going to change this one to be part cylinder head. And we're going to change this one to be part spark plug. Perfect. And then we're just going to grab, I'm going to close that one up so you can see. So I'm just going to grab this body, the cylinder head body, drop it in part cylinder head, spark plug body, part spark plug. And you'll see that they're all in there perfectly. And now we just got to do the same things and create all our LCSs. So let's turn off our cylinder head. Let's go back in here and turn on our cylinder block. And I think the first thing we want to do with the cylinder block is we're going to create an LCS just here. So at the top of this bore in the middle will be perfect. So let's go back into that Assembly4. When I did the modification to the cylinder head, it automatically switched me back to part design. So just make sure that if you do anything like that, that you're in the right workbench. Otherwise, you're going to struggle a little bit. Okay, so part cylinder block. Going to hit that. I'm going to call this. I'm actually going to call it cylinder block bore. Cylinder block bore. And I'm just literally just going to pick this guy, say concentric, and my Z is pointing up, so that's all good. Say OK. And refresh. Go down there, turn off that guy, turn on this guy. And we're just going to flip him up this way. I want to put one right on that guy. So here's what we're going to do. It's going to go right here in this diameter. So we select cylinder head, put in this guy. We're going to call this cylinder head bore. How about that? And we hit that. We just want that line there. We're going to say concentric, and we can see our Z is pointing up again, so everything looks good there. We can apply and say OK. And then I want to get that cylinder head. I'm now going to put one in for the spark plug, and that's just going to be in this area here. So I can pick the top of that thread, or I can pick this diameter. It doesn't really matter because it's going to be concentric. So I'm going to pick cylinder head, put in another LCS. So I'm going to call this cylinder head spark plug. And I'm just going to select, I'll just select this guy here. I'm going to go with that diameter and say it's concentric. Z is pointing up, say OK. And there's my cylinder head done. So now I'm going to turn off my cylinder head. I'm going to turn on my spark plug. Let me just close that guy out. Turn on my spark plug. And I just, for this assembly, I just need something in the bottom here. So it's just going to be right around there. And we're going to move that up. So we'll just select our spark plug. Just going to call this spark plug and say select this diameter. I want the topmost diameter if I can get it. Zoom in a bit. That one. Concentric. And I'm going to assume that that's pointing upwards. I think it will be, but if it's not, we can always adjust. Okay, so now I should be able to go back in my engine assembly, and I should be able to link another part, and you can see all the cylinder block parts are here. So part cylinder block, say insert cylinder block, and that's the cylinder block bore. And I want to do that on my part piston, my part piston bore. And if we look, that looks pretty good. I think we'll say OK to that. So now we have the cylinder block in, and the cylinder block is inside of the, or around the piston. And then we're going to put the head on. Just notice my cylinder block doesn't have my fins on it. I'm not sure why that's the case, so I'll look at that later. I'm not worried about it for now. We're just showing you how to put the parts together. So let's go add another piece to my model. Cylinder block part head, insert that. Head bore. It's going to go on my cylinder block bore. And you can see that that is exactly where we want it to go. So let's say OK. And then we're going to select our model. We're going to insert another part. It's going to be the spark plug. We're going to say insert the spark plug. We're going to put it on the cylinder block. Oh, sorry, cylinder head. Spark plug. And that was wrong. My Z is the wrong way up if you look. If we zoom in. So as I said, we can fix that. We can rotate on Y, I think, twice. And that should give us exactly what we want. And then we can say OK to that. And now our spark plug fits in. Our head is on. Our cylinder block is on. And we have a complete assembly. Okay, so now we have that. Let's just check why we haven't got these fins showing here, because we did create them. So let's go back in our cylinder block. This is our cylinder block model. And if I look in our cylinder block model, there it is. You see I have the pad is highlighted. It should be the subtractive pipe. And that gives us our fins back. And then if I go back into my assembly, you can see the fins are all there now. So that's all perfect. All looks good. I didn't actually put fins in the head yet, or bothered to do that, so not worry. You can see my cylinder is good. The bore in the cylinder is a bit bigger than the piston because you would have piston rings on there. I didn't model those, but we could, and we could add them. The crankshaft's in the right place. Everything looks good. And one thing I will show you that you can do, I believe you can do it once you've already assembled it, is you can say random color for each of these pieces. And what it'll do is it'll randomize some colors for them. And it helps you to see the assembly a little bit. And then, so if I go with my crankshaft, random color, and my cylinder block, random color, and my cylinder head, a random color, and of course you can pick colors if you want to, and my spark plug, a random color. There we go. And if I just zoom into where it is, now you can see all the parts a little better, that you can see what's what because they're all set up with different colors. You can of course go in and you can change the colors around, do whatever you want to do. So hopefully that helps you to create an assembly in Assembly4 from a number of various parts. And I took it from the point of view of we're creating parts that we didn't know necessarily we were going to put them in an assembly, so we didn't worry about that at the beginning, because you don't always know that you want to make an assembly, and you don't always know exactly how you're going to lay things out. And so, you know, it's a good thing to be able to see how you might possibly set this up and get it back to where you want it to be in terms of being able to manage it. Now, one thing I will tell you is in Assembly4, you can do this parts list. And if I hit that, you'll see my bill of materials. They call it bill of materials. It's kind of, yeah, it's okay. But it tells me that all the pieces that I have in here. So you can do that. You can copy those out. So you can have a list of all the parts that you have in your assembly. Now, as far as the assembly is concerned, I could animate it. I don't think I can animate this shaft and make that turn around. I just think the shaft will turn around, but it won't pull the thing down. So the animation certainly in Assembly4 is not as intricate and exact as you might like to be able to create that animation. What I would do personally, if I was creating this animation, I would take this and put it in Blender, and then I would do the animation in Blender. We'll take a look. Remember, we're going to do Assembly3. So when we do Assembly3, what we'll do is we'll check and see what that can do in terms of animations. I'll be honest with you, I haven't done any animations in Assembly3. I have done some in Assembly4, but it's more of a straight line linear actuation that I've done, and I don't think it's worth the effort to put all the time in to get the rest of the animation. Somebody else may think that it is, and if that's the case, then certainly you might want to leave me a comment below, and I'll take a look and see if that's something that's cool. One thing I was just looking at is probably I should have assembled this with the cylinder and head at 90 degrees so that this cylinder goes over this part. Again, you can do that when you're creating the assembly as you're putting things together. I didn't do that. I only just noticed it, so that's why I didn't do it, and I'm not going to spend the time to do it now. So it's pretty easy to change if you want to. Okay, so if you've enjoyed this video, please give us a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. There's loads more stuff coming out. Obviously, we're going to do the next video is going to show this whole assembly, but in Assembly3, and we'll be doing that in version 0.2. I am currently running, and I should have told you this at the beginning, but I am currently running version 0.19. It's the 24291 Git, the latest release that was available when I downloaded. And I haven't moved to 0.2 yet, but I will use that to do the Assembly3. Okay, thanks to all my patrons who have helped me to come up with the ideas and the content for the videos. They certainly have some great suggestions. I appreciate them, and I appreciate them coming up with suggestions. And I'm absolutely going to create videos around their suggestions as they're kind enough to support me. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.